Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Friday, May 13th installment of the Silicon Insider, the only uncensored look at life and business in the Valley. My name is Mike Malone, and I'm here with special contributor Scott Budman, technology reporter from NBC Bay Area. Our producer is Jordan Henderson. Our East Coast correspondent is Bob Grove, and our host, as always, is the Silicon Valley Business Journal. Okay, Scott. Well, I was going to kick off with crypto, but we have Elon Musk news. Okay, so let's get, it's been crazy. Let's get up to date on Elon right now.
Well, so right, we're taping this Friday morning, and even as we had some firings yesterday at Twitter of management people and things were looking shaky anyway, Elon Musk tweets out that the deal is on hold for him to buy Twitter. He says he's still committed to it, but of all things, he says he has to look more closely at the spam bots. And I think what he really means is the stock price is pretty low. He may be able to get a better deal than $44 billion. So he's putting everybody on hold.
All right, it broke this morning. Now, are you buying that Elon didn't know that there was a lot of spam bots and fake accounts all over Twitter?
No. In fact, that was one of the reasons he had said, hey, we need to make this a more real town square, a more accurate description of the people who are out there. We got to get rid of the bots. And so this is just something I think convenient to say, let's back off and see if maybe I can get a better price. If he's still indeed interested, he
tweeted about an hour later, I'm still in the game. I still want Twitter.
Right.
But it just strikes me as a negotiating move rather than a revelation on his part.
I agree.
And who I think gets hurt the most by all this? Besides, well, maybe Twitter shareholders, but they're still going to get a hell of a deal. I think Facebook, because this brings to the surface again, fake accounts, dead accounts, all of that kind of stuff. And there's always been this sort of feeling about Facebook that when it got to 1 billion users, that, maybe a quarter of those are illusion.
Right. But I think we've already known this. I don't think anyone is looking at today's tweet from Musk and saying, whoa, there are fake accounts on social media, companies. That's not new. I agree with you. It's a negotiating tactic. Twitter shareholders are angry. The stock is way down this morning. Twitter employees are once again in flux. They're probably angry.
Well, there's blood washing the walls all over the C-suite.
Right. They've already lost some of the people they like. And
VPs, major VPs, revenue VP and consumer VP.
Right.
That's a bloodletting.
It is. And it's just probably getting started, especially if this deal goes down at a much cheaper price. But also, look at the wider picture. Tesla shareholders were worried because would Musk be too distracted? Would the shares, is he taking loans out on his shares for Tesla? Tesla stock is way up this morning as Twitter goes way down. So we've now figured a way that these two companies would trade as polar opposites as they have been lately. And today that really comes to the fore with Tesla shooting higher and Twitter shooting lower.
Yeah, well, at the moment, Elon's got to be motivated because with the way the stock fell this week, it was well below, what he was offering for the place. Yeah, so he's setting it up to go back to the negotiating table. Most of the other, I guess, all the other players are out of the bidding war if there ever was one. So he's got a lot of, and they're already losing talent. He's going in there to that negotiation holding most of the cards, I think.
I agree, but I would disagree with one thing only. I think that Twitter is definitely in play. And if the Musk deal falls through, other suitors will take that next step. But remember also, there are VCs, there are other investors who have now put money into the Musk deal. So This isn't just one guy and one company anymore. I think it's one guy, his investors, other suitors waiting in the wings, and this one company that has been hit for a pretty big loss this morning.
Well, I suspect that Elon probably heard from those hidden investors too.
Yes.
They're saying, wait a minute, this is worth a lot less than we're paying for it. You got to go cut, Elon, you got to go cut a better deal.
And that makes sense on one level, but I can see where the shareholders would be angry because they were sort of holding their stock, counting on $54.20.
Yeah.
That is now more than $10 billion away. And, that's a big chasm right there for a deal. And I think you're right. Elon knows that. And is, if he is indeed committed to this deal, he's probably thinking I can get a better price.
Okay, well, we'll see. I mean, one thing about Elon, you can't predict the future more than about 24 hours,
Right.
and he will always be in the news. Okay,
and whatever delivery is made here will be delivered late. So
yeah,
everybody's going to have to wait.
Keep your eye on the rolling AP and service and the other financial services in case something breaks while we're talking.
Right.
Okay. Crypto collapse. This has been a bad week. I think, well, you wrote to me, fortune, it turns out, doesn't always favor the brave. Absolutely. More than $200 billion was erased from the entire crypto market in a day this week. And the sell-off's still continuing. What's going on?
This was a big crisis of confidence, I think. And let's face it, crypto is largely a confidence game. You have Bitcoin, which has soared, and even at $30,000 a coin, which it briefly dipped below yesterday, and everyone's, that's less than half its value. But remember, this was something that, was less than $1 not all that long ago. It soared, it fell, it soared again, it's falling. This is just a speculative investment at this point. But this went much deeper than the coins you've heard of. This went into stable coins, which to me are very, very wrongly named. But, they are pegged to the dollar, which doesn't necessarily mean, as we've learned, that it follows the dollar. It's not backed by the dollar. There's a significant difference. What's in your wallet right now is backed by the dollar and the US government, which is why you can buy things with confidence with that paper money you hold. But things like, Tether, which is pegged to the dollar, fell below the dollar. People freaked out. We had another type of currency, cryptocurrency, that was, sort of said to be pegged to the dollar. That was Terra. It lost just about all of its value, falling to just pennies. And what does this mean? This means that confidence was lost. It doesn't mean our financial system went into some crazy spiral. It meant confidence was lost in these kind of made up currencies that I don't know how else to better explain that.
Yeah, because, well, I think your term confidence game is a perfect and apt one, because it's reminiscent of, 3-card money and, circus barkers, carnival guys and the sideshows. We've been warning for a long time that this is such a volatile game to play in. And once you lose confidence, what else is there? I mean, in a sense, we still in the back of our minds think of the US dollar as being backed by Fort Knox. It hasn't been for a long time, but nevertheless, you have the entire US government infrastructure backing the dollar, battleships and, buildings and land and everything else. What's backing crypto but other people's belief that it's valuable?
Right. I mean, this was originally a coin used to sort of dodge the government and buy things online, which, illegality aside, I get it. I understand how that works. But then it became an investment. And all of a sudden, when it becomes an investment, like most investments, the market decides its value.
Privacy out of it. The government was never going to let you hide your money in crypto, not for long.
Not for long. And that sort of coincided with the speculative investment. And so you have entire, almost shadow economies built out of crypto, not to mention companies. Look at Robinhood, which was pretty much made to make it easy to trade meme stocks and crypto. Started the year a year ago, $70 a share. Yesterday, it fell below 10. Someone moved in to buy stock in Robinhood.
Oh, yeah, you can buy gum right now with your Robinhood stock.
Yeah, but it's up 25% this morning because someone who made a bunch of money in what else crypto is going to buy a bunch of Robinhood stock. So this is really being moved and manipulated, not by anything that, we consider standard economic practice. And that's why it can fall so fast, because if you lose confidence, why would you even stay in if it's not just going to rocket to the moon every day? And the fact is, no investment does.
What do you go into if you're not going into the dollar right now? You're not going into stock. You're not going into crypto. Are you buying art? I've been sort of monitoring the auctions around the country, and they don't seem to be out of control. I don't see antiques going through the roof or coins. They're pretty much going for their value, or estimated value. So where are people putting their money now? In their socks, in their mattresses?
Well, no, look, we're not having a depression or anything like that. We may be
We're
heading
pretty damn close to a recession.
We are close, right? And that's largely because of inflation and the rise of interest rates. If you look at the stock market, yes, there is a crisis of confidence, but look at where cagey investors are putting their money as we speak. And again, this could change in minutes, but the Dow is up 450 points. The NASDAQ is up 400 points. That's 3.5%. People are starting to see some value in whatever they traditionally see value in, beaten down stocks.
Yeah.
But, the crypto thing is something different because there will always be speculators to keep some of these things alive. But you have to know going in that if we learned anything from this Terra, which fell from $1 to $0, which is 100% of its value, there's really no bottom until the very bottom. And if people run for the exits, they're going to run for the exits, and people get caught holding the bag. And I spoke to many investors, young men mostly, but young investors who said they lost money, hopefully not a lot, but they got in just to sort of experiment. But how do you keep up with these things? Oh, I didn't know how to find my Terra when the losses started because, there's no E-Trade out there for this yet.
Well, you talked about cagey investors. How about overly cagey investors? I mean, I felt like deja vu this week with looking at GameStop. Is that what the now the kids have? They moved out into stock and they bought Twitter and all that. And now they're moving back into the old game of hyping up, valueless stocks. We saw GameStop go up more than 30% at one point, had to be halted for the volatility of the exchange. That's kind of cool. And AMC, of course. I mean, this really feels like the conversation we had about a year and a half ago.
Right. And that's what's largely keeping Robinhood afloat, I think, not to mention relevant at all is, the trading of meme stocks and crypto. And right. I mean, AMC, GameStop, halted for volatility. They weren't being bought out. They weren't announcing a new, CEO or a dividend or anything like that. It was just because every once in a while, people jump into these things. And again, that's not cagey investing. That's sort of, I don't know, jumping in and what did you say? Yeah.
Meme investing. Yeah.
It's meme investing. Right. It's very much, I'm checking out at the counter at the store and I see something and I impulse buy it. And I hope other people do too. And when they do, the stock goes up, but there's really no way to track when that's going to happen.
But, I have to admit, I was kind of disappointed they went back to the same well. I mean, these kids are supposed to be super imaginative and creative, and they go back to GameStop and AMC. I mean, they're just going to keep doing that, write it up, get out, wait it collapses, sit around for a couple of months and then go back in.
That's a very good question. Right. When's the next meme stock round? And is every company that's kind of small and scrappy saying, hey, why not us? Why does it have to be a movie theater of all things? And yeah, maybe there's somebody out there that somebody has their eye on and it's going to be the next meme stock. But you're right. For whatever reason, the meme stock game hasn't been very creative lately.
Now let's talk about an interesting bit of news. I guess we're going back to status quo ante in terms of wealth. This week on Wednesday, oil giant Saudi Aramco passed Apple as the world's most valuable firm. Is that a symbol of something? I mean, in the old days, it was always the oil companies, mainly Middle Eastern oil companies, Royal Dutch Shell and that kind of thing, that were the world's most valuable companies. And IBM and GE couldn't keep up with them. And for the last 20 years, it's been tech all the way. And now, the worm has turned again, and it's a Saudi oil company beating out Apple. I mean, it's not by a lot. And the numbers are insane. 2.3 trillion for Aramco compared to 2.37 trillion for Apple because its stock fell 5% in trading.
Well, look, there are two things that happened even recently. I mean, the price of oil shot up, as we've seen every time we go to the pump because of what's going on in Russia. and that boosts the price or the market value of a company like Saudi Aramco. But also here in America, we had a big tech sell-off. And that took Apple from very, very near $3 trillion down by $600-700 billion, which is a staggering figure to lose.
It's hard to imagine a stock swing or a cap value swinging $600 billion.
Right, but that's close to, a quarter of its value. And that's a big drop for any company, not to mention Apple. So you've got, you have two things going in opposite directions. And I'd like to think that
oil descendants right now. Thank you, Vladimir Putin, and consumer electronics kind of being eclipsed a little bit right now.
Right. And I think Apple, the fundamentals of Apple aren't any worse than they were 6 months ago. It's just we're really in a big sell-off. And that's why that goes down at a time when oil is suddenly more expensive all over the globe because of what's going on in Ukraine. And so I think those two sort of confluenced to, all of a sudden oil is eclipsing tech. I'd like to think that won't be such a long-term thing, but who knows?
And let's face it, you can, if you're an Apple person, you're thinking to yourself, things are getting so expensive, groceries and all that. I really can't afford to buy anything. And then Apple introduces the next generation of its, phone, and you go, oh, squirrel. And you're down there lined up with your sleeping bag in front of the Apple store. I mean,
right. We haven't
a guaranteed market.
Right. It's not the first time we've seen that, where we've seen tough times in the overall economy. And then Apple comes up with something and the demand is through the roof. That's how it is. And that's how you get to be, at least until a couple of days ago, the most valuable company in the world.
Let's talk about Apple a little bit more, because we had a landmark, a milestone this week. And that was the end of what I really think is Steve Jobs' greatest creation, which is the iPod. The iPod is officially retired. And like most technology products, when they retire, it's not with a bang, but a whimper. The world has moved on. It's been made obsolete. You don't think about it anymore. But this was Steve's first big breakout. I mean, he came out with the fancy colored Mac when he returned to Apple, but the iPod is his masterpiece. The Apple II was. Steve was good on packaging. The Macintosh was really another operation, a division at Apple that he kind of hijacked after Lisa failed. But the iPod was something special. The timing was perfect. I don't know if you remember, but it came out like 2 weeks after 9/11. And we were all in a state of shock. And I remember being in an electronics store and seeing these new Apple iPods sitting there in their little display and thinking, what the hell is this? How come there wasn't a big launch or anything like that? And the fact is, they couldn't have launched it with a big publicity event like the Mac event at Flynn Center. They kind of rolled it out quietly, and then it just built up momentum. And by Christmas, it was on its way. And, Steve was never a programmer. He was never really a super hard tech guy, but he had a genius for understanding what people wanted, even if they didn't yet want it, didn't even know it existed. And with the iPod and the ability of that thing to hold an unimaginable at the time amount of recorded music was mind-boggling. And then they moved that thing, it had a little tiny disc in it, and they migrated that to memory chips as they got more powerful, which ended, in a sense, the electromechanical world of consumer electronics and introduced the purely digital world.
Yeah, I mean,
it was extraordinary.
I was at the launch of the iPod, and it was a small event. One of the early stories I covered, one of the first stories I covered here, and it was in their, their old headquarters, obviously pre-spaceship. This is 2001 in October, like you say. It was in the auditorium. Not all that many people, not all that many reporters. And it was, I think you're right. It was the combination of the iPod and, of course, iTunes, which can't be overlooked. That was
right,
just as important. Really changed.
It was at the nexus of everything he was trying to do.
Right.
Which was amazing too.
Well, it opened up a huge market. I mean, it changed the game for tech companies. It changed the game for the music world, for better or for worse. I mean, it sent them into just crazy ups and downs. And what do we do with licensing fees? And remember, Napster is in the mix and all that stuff. But also the idea that iTunes could be accessed on your Windows computer was, remember, they put out those posters, well, hell has frozen over. That really, because Apple at the time was still a niche maker of laptops and PCs, and so this opened the door to everyone now can carry their music with them. And I mean, it just changed the game, you're right, in so many different ways for both the tech field and the music world.
And and I think it as you said, it turned Apple, it changed the mindset at Apple, and I think it really paved the way for the iPhone.
I agree. If you think about what made it obsolete, it was the iPhone. And even when the iPhone came out, it was, okay, this is going to cannibalize a lot of the iPods.
Sure.
But if you remember, but also the iPhone was sort of precious at first. You didn't want to jog with it. You didn't want to take it to the gym. So you sweat with it. You still had your iPod.
Right.
Or if you were one of the few who bought the Microsoft Zune, you had that. But it was, the iPhone was still kind of precious, and the iPod was still something you could rock and roll with and get messy with. And, those commercials, by the way, of the dancing people in the shadows, it really changed the game. And it's almost hard to imagine life before it.
Yeah. Everybody thinks the 1984 Mac commercial changed the game, but the iPod commercials, I think, had a much more enduring impact. The idea is use contemporary music. This giant company was, literally on the cutting edge of advertising creativity. And I think that's Steve's genius. I mean, he gets credit for a lot of things he doesn't deserve. I mean, even the iPod wasn't his physical creation. But I've always said what made him special was he had a giant company with a lot of investment money. And when somebody came in with an idea to him, he was not only receptive, but if your idea wasn't advanced enough, if it didn't take enough of a risk, he threw you out. He told you to come back and try again. Now, no CEO that I know of in modern American business does that. I mean, you literally have the boss demand you take an even greater risk and be even wilder than what you want to do. It's almost always the opposite of that. And as a result, he made Apple. We haven't seen a company like this. You have to go back to HP in the 50s, a company that is so dynamic that it shocks you, that it's so big and yet it's so nimble and so creative that you just sit back in awe. And what's the next big thing? And throughout, the first decade of this century, Steve Jobs changed the world, 4 times? He established, the reason Apple's almost a $3 trillion company is because he created 4 revolutionary new multi-billion-dollar industries. That's an amazing achievement.
Right. And I think it says something that the iPod was so successful and yet was sunsetted, was eclipsed by a product that ended up selling even more and making even more money. And that's how you do it. When you're really successful, you can't just say, well, this had a lifetime and then it turned out it was obsolete. No, it was just eclipsed by a product from the very same company. And how rare is that? That's impressive.
Well, the only thing I found disappointing was Apple didn't do a big retirement for it.
Product losses are often.
I remember when Hewlett Packard retired the HP 35 calculator, the first great intelligent, scientific calculator. They put out a press release that was like an obituary, talking about how it had been used and all of that, how it changed people's lives. And I think it's one of the greatest press releases ever written. And Apple should have done something for the iPod. They should have, Viking burial or something, send it off into glory, because it literally changed consumer life.
I agree. And I'm sure there was somebody in there, sort of a wing of Apple that wanted to do it. But look, Mike, that company is just too corporate now. They're just moving on. They're looking forward. It
says something.
Right. It loses a little bit of its fun when a company gets that big. But I think it's up to the users, those of us who still have them, to pull them out, plug them in, see if they work, and roll a little, I don't know, play your yahs. Yeah, anything but
Rush.
U2. Right.
Okay. Finally, I want to do a shout out to one of our listeners. We hear from our listeners pretty regularly, but this one's kind of unique. This is, I got a note the other day from Renaud Roquebert. And I know Renaud, he's a real Silicon Valleyite at heart, even though he's French and he lives just outside of Paris. But he's a regular listener, and he sent me a note saying he listens to it every Saturday morning as he runs along the bank of the Seine. And I thought, wow, okay, now that's not only a reach for the Silicon Insider, but how cool is that? So I want to give a shout out to Renaud. Silicon Valley misses you. We hope you come back, and I hope you keep listening.
That's really nice to know that the Silicon Valley news is being consumed out there along the Seine. There's something romantic about that.
Okay, that's it for now, folks. You can find us on the Silicon Valley Business Journal homepage, as well as on Spotify, Anchor, Google Podcast, Apple Podcasts, LinkedIn, and of course, check out our YouTube page. Have a great weekend, and we'll see you next week. Bye-bye.